Say everybody, Jim Messina here with Vintage Drums Talk at the Chicago 2014 Vintage and Custom Drum Show. We're coming to you from the REBEATS Cafe, and once again, I'm especially honored to be sitting here with icons in the vintage drum community and icons in the rock world in general. Mr. Bunny Carlos, how you doing, my friend?
We're good. How you doing, Jim?
I'm doing great, especially at our new venue here. Mike CUROTTO, our good friend, King Snare Collector. Always great to have these guys with me. You saw us last year talking about a Nard marching drum and, remember, the zebra drum. We had a nice conversation about that. But Bun, look at this. He's brought this Peacock Pearl, whatever. Explain this to us. What do we got here?
Jim, it's a Peacock Pearl standard.
Uh-huh.
It's probably late 20s. It's the earlier strainer, so we think it's probably pre-con. A lot of drums come from back in the day with writing on them or in them or about them, on or around or in the drum.
Okay.
So a lot of times you'll find on 20s drums, you'll find engraved names on the hoops, especially on the engraved drums.
Okay.
This is not an engraved drum. There is no engraving on the hoops, but unfortunately, on this drum, on the badge next to the strainer, right here,
Okay.
previous owner, Orchestra Snare, drum number 1.
Oh, it's right in the
Foreman High School, engraved right into the rack.
Oh. Okay, we're gonna get a shot of that.
And before the fellow engraved it, he had to make sure the engraver worked, so he tried it on another panel first.
I see.
And carved it up a little bit.
Yeah.
So
Now, I have never actually seen somebody try to hand engrave into what do we call this? Pyrrolin or
into a wrap, a
pyrrolin?
pyrrolin wrap.
Okay.
This is not uncommon to find drums from the day with, these were costly investments to make in the 20s and in the Depression. So you had to put your name on something so it didn't walk away, or you left it on the bus or on the train. And it makes the drum no less collectible, but it does detract from the value a bit because it's now the museum quality goes away and the excellent condition goes away.
I'm looking at the finish, and this has more green in it than I've ever seen of the Peacock rainbow type pearls. What are we categorizing this as?
Well, I call it peacock.
Yeah, that's what they listed it as.
Just a form of peacock. I know there's a
like Aldridge calls it Peacock 1 because the 2 was more with the blues in the 30s,
And this drum has blue on the edges where it hasn't faded as much. Which brings up a question of what did it look like when it was new? In the catalog, all the pictures are hand tinted. There's no color photographs from the day. George Lawrence had a mint Peacock snare drum a couple years ago that had a lot more color on it, and that's the only drum I've ever seen that may look anything like the original, because I don't think anybody knows what the originals look like. It's kind of a coin toss.
We have no real photographs, do we? It's just all just catalog images.
So it's one of these mystery things from the past, unless we find some guy that had one in a suitcase in 1929 and it's never been taken out.
Yeah. And how long have you had this?
Well, I think I purchased this from you probably in the early aughts, so 10 years ago. Mike was the original Peacock hound back in the day. Before I knew Mike, I knew a fellow named Paul Jameson in L.A.
Okay.
He had 4 or 5 of them. You might have ended up with some at some point, I don't know. He had to auction his off in the early 80s. And I'd never seen them before. I didn't know what they were. And then one day I opened up a not-so-modern drummer from the Aldrich era, and there was Mike with about a dozen of them sitting there. And here's this one, number 11 over here.
I remember seeing the spread, Mike, on you. You had been into this 2 years, and they did a spread on you. This is when I was just getting into it, and I'm saying, who is this guy CUROTTO, and how did he get this far in 2 years? And then along comes Bun. I started researching his collection. Things like this are just amazing to me.
I saw Mike's picture with these peacocks, and when I changed my undies and quit crying and all the other good stuff, got my jaw up off the floor and attached it to my skull, I was like, how do I get one of these? So I called John Aldrich. I started networking, and then I finally called Mike and got one. Because Mike had all the ones that had been found in a place where they seem to show up a lot, which seems to be the West Coast. So there's another question. Why were they all on the West Coast? I don't know. They make good salesmen.
How many of these do you have?
I got about probably 12, 13.
Yeah. Bun?
I have a new era I purchased from Mike.
A new era?
Yeah.
Would you explain to our folks
what a new... under the top head and a snare inside on the bottom. And both snares are inside the drum. They say, oh, you could take them and flip them over, but I think they were made for brushes. I'm not sure. Or someone had a great idea in 1927.
How many of those were around? I mean, I've always wanted to see one. I think I may have come across one at the show. Have we seen one here in the last couple of years?
3 or 4. I have one. Bunny has one. I think I've heard maybe 1 or 2 more.
In Peacock, there's 3 or
Peacock,
4. Metal ones show up regularly. I have a metal one at home, a brass one. They were, I think a lot of people picked up on those when they came out too.
Now these drums, you know, everybody's seen your barn, pretty much a reference to it or some shots, and you're a Ludwig guy, but this type of stuff you don't play, do you?
I don't perform on it much. This could be a player just because it's not a museum quality drum, but then you run into issues with the clips and the hoops. You know, after 70 or 80 or 90 years, there's going to be a certain stress and strain. They're going to crack. They're going to age.
I did want to ask you. I think in an article I read, you were talking about guys that are in love with Black Beauties, right? They're just a coveted drum, mainly because of its appearance, right? And you described to them, hey, you can get that great Black Beauty sound by just simply
brass.
Yeah.
Brass is brass.
Yeah.
The Black Beauties, of course, they have the flange in them. They're well made. The bearing edges are good, so the drum resonates good. But I took a 6-lug brass shell once. I picked up from a guy some guy with a hammer had done this all afternoon for who knows why.
Yeah.
And I got the tube lugs out and the strainer and the butt plate and the hoops and the hooks and put the drum back together and hit it, and it was 95% on the way to being a brass Black Beauty sound. You know, maybe a little bit off, but brass is brass. It all sounds good. Well, solid wood is usually solid wood, and it's usually the same thing, too.
So what was the actual model usually used for Black Beauty? I mean, a Black Beauty, what makes a Black Beauty is all the dressings,
shell,
right? It's just a standard
two-piece brass shell.
Yeah.
And then later on, the one-piece spun, I guess they call it.
And have you recorded with that?
Black Beauties?
Or even the deluxe?
I've recorded with new Black Beauties. I've recorded with old standards from 1923. I used one from about 84 to 94, so it's on Flame and Don't Be Cruel and some of those records,
I think that was the reference you made. That guys, if you want to get that sound on Don't Be Cruel, I used a
1923 8-lug 5x14 standard. I cranked that sucker up to sound like a timbali almost. But it's brass. They ring, they resonate, they
These
sound
hoops
good.
or triple
straight hoops, collar hooks. And of course, this 1923 standard I had, by the time I got done using it for 10 years, I was a new strainer, new tubes, new hoops, new tension rods. The only thing original metal on the drum was the badge and the butt plate. Because everything was getting stressed and I didn't want to bust original parts, so finally after about 5 years I stripped the drum and bought repro parts. And no one ever, in a concert, people are 50 feet away, so nobody walks up and goes, hey, you got the wrong hoops on that drum.
Right.
So it was no problem.
They're looking for sound,
Yeah, it was all for the years.
Now, both you guys have fantastic collections and are known in our community as just mega collectors. I've wondered about the trends that you go through. Let's say in the past 5 years, Bun, what has changed about your collection? I've noticed, some very interesting pieces have traded hands, either to Mike or someone else. I'm just wondering what, like the abalone snare I think we were talking about, and last year we did the zebra snare, things like that, and the terracotta the year before. And I'm thinking, because I'm monitoring you, I do watch what you do, and I'm thinking, gosh, how's he letting those go and why? Is there any specific reason why though you decide to?
Part of the reason I bring things into here is I upgrade. So suddenly I have a new one that's better than the one I had, so I have an extra one. And part of it is, what am I collecting? I was collecting all Ludwig finishes at one point. Now I'm going more for 1950s on. And the third thing being, I'm in my 60s now. It took me 20 years to put my collection together, so I think I have 15 years to on-collect it. And you don't sell collections as a whole, you sell them usually how you get them, one by one. So as I get older, I'm just deciding, well, I got one of every finish in the early 20s. Now it's time to pass them on to other people that are collecting them.
See, now that mentality there, folks, I just wanted to touch on this. When you're talking with the collectors like this, and we're all pretty much brothers in collecting, once you reach a certain level in this community, it's stuff like this. he'll sell a drum to him. He'll let a drum go to him. And this happens a lot because you know it's going to a good place, and that's so very important to have the respect and reverence for these drums and the people that are going to collect them. Here you've got two top-notch collectors in this community, and a lot of you know that, but some of you new guys don't even know that Bunny collects drums. You say he's the Cheap Trick drummer, the guy that you followed for years, but he's an uber collector and a highly respected collector at that. And I want you to know that it's important to know where drums like this are going to end up. Make sure you're selling things to a reputable person and you do it in a respectful way. Because in this community, would you guys agree that, you know, I learned this back when I was selling the 13th Slingerland Black Beauty. Here, you know, I'm not all that well known in the community, but at that time, somebody knew enough to call me, and I ended up with this 13th Slingerland Black Beauty, and they wanted me to sell it for them. And I was no broker, but I ended up offering it to Bun, everybody had their chance to say no thanks or whatever. But there's that certain pecking order, I know, and I've discovered very quickly there that you don't just throw it up in the air and say, hey, you guys, fight over this thing. And I just want to say, here's an example of two high collectors that have reached a high echelon, and I have such an ultimate respect for both of you, and I appreciate you sitting down with me every year the way we do and talk about, you know, the minutiae with this drum, and I look forward to it every year, and I just want to say thanks so much
Jim.
for being a part of what I do and the show and your contributions to the vintage drum community.
You know, me and Mike are what you would call motivated collectors.
Yes.
And in the drum world is not a billion people, so it's like the rock music world. It's a small world, relatively speaking. And you know, if you're a jerk to somebody on the way up, they'll nail you on your way down, or whatever. That's what they say in the rock business, you know. And it's the same with the drum collecting world. A guy sold me a scrapbook last year with Duke Ellington in it, Dave Tuff, Gene Krupa, Buddy Rich,
man, I'd love that.
Benny Goodman, Louis Armstrong, Stan Kenton. It was a book a guy had put together in the 30s, an autograph book, and tipped them in and put pictures in. This guy got this book, and I was like, oh, you want to sell that thing? And we did a deal on Drum Forum. This guy, he was a Drum Forum member.
Directly through the forum?
I traded him 4 prototypes, valued at about $1,400 for it. He called me up about a year later. I feel terrible about that. You know, my dad was a big band guy. If there was anything I could ever do over again, I'd get that book back from you. You want those snare drums back? And I said, no. But I said, they're worth $1,400.
But you said it respectfully, right?
I said, give me $1,400 and you can have your book back. I understand how you feel. I sold things and I regret it. And sure, you can have a second chance. I love the book, but I feel bad keeping it with you sitting at home going, yeah, I wish I had that book. That asshole got my book. You know, whatever the case may be. So I sent the book back to him. You know, it was a karma move. It was a good karma move.
It's a funny one.
Guy'll throw me a good deal someday, maybe.
It's happened with Mike and I. You know, Mike's got every snare drum there is, pretty much. You know, so in that spread that I mentioned with Mike, you had, you know, you had been at it for 2 years, and there's a sea green Liberty snare with a bent.
Yeah, I left it because, you know, the old time drummers.
And here at the show, I had an opportunity to buy it, and I got it. Okay. Years later, I had a reason to send you some photos, and accidentally in that group of photos was that snare drum. And Mike sends me an email, Jim, what are those 2 drums there, especially the green one? And I had to write him back, Mike, you're getting lost here. You already owned it. You sure you want that? And it's this kind of stuff happens. I mean, I don't blame you for getting a little misconstrued. He's got, what's the count now, 650 or something?
570.
570?
Minus,
Oh boy, but he's even got a bigger drum key collection.
About 750.
Have you ever counted up your stuff? I mean, you have any idea what you got in that Bunny's barn as far as numbers?
I have 500 of nothing. I got about 40 kits, and, you know, a couple hundred snare drums, maybe 150 cymbals, and I've got a nice stick collection.
Yes.
You know, I've got a Ginger Baker, Keith Moon, Ringo Starr, John Bonham, all my heroes and stuff. So stuff like that. You know, I got a nice autograph collection of a lot of my drum heroes.
Still got the 1920s trap console.
Got a couple trap consoles, a couple nice ones. I got a nice floor one that's art gold plated, stands on the floor. That's just.
Was that the Ludwig and Ludwig one?
It came with a Ludwig and Ludwig sea green kit, and a guy out east sent me a bunch of the art gold hardware. Yeah.
And you and I worked on that one where it has the drop down bar.
Yeah.
And
you called me about trap tables, and I sent you pics and measurements of mine.
Now, there's an example, you guys. Now here's me just saying, these guys are high level. At that time, with this Ludwig
That's
trap
how
stand.
we met.
Yes, it's called a Ludwig trap stand, 1920s. I came across some parts. Gosh, somehow I got your number. And anyways, no problem. He was totally affable, sent me measurements, pictures, and it just, it worked out great. And ever since then, I've just had the utmost respect for these high-level collectors. They're high level, but not so high that they can't talk to you about something great. You know what I mean? They're not aloof.
You just said that, but when I started collecting, guys like John Aldridge, Harry Cangany,
Yes.
Rob Cook,
Yes.
they took their time. Funny guys that I never knew. They
We
took
have to
their
learn.
time to answer my questions. So I just passed the vibe on, answer the questions the best I can. If I don't know, I'll put you to the person that does.
Yes, and
Yeah.
I get a lot of that, and I get a lot of requests for you guys, personal information, to tell you the truth, through Vintage Drums Talk, and I have to pick and choose sometimes. Well, because you can't answer everybody. You know what that is, Spawn.
Single white drummer looking for fulfillment.
Yeah,
with a
yes.
Single lonely snare drum.
And on that note, guys, it's been a pleasure. Bunny Carlos,
Thank you.
Mike Curotto,
Anytime.
JC MESSINA here for VintageDrumsTalk.com. We're at the 2014 Vintage and Custom Drum Show at the REBEATS Cafe. We're having a great time interviewing the top collectors here at this show. We're going to see you again. We're going to have Bob Campbell coming up here shortly. Stick around for that. Take care, folks. We'll be right back.